So here we have the hair that I've continued to work on, and this is what she's looking like up to now. I'll admit there's still a few areas that I'd like to tweak with the hair, but I think as far as this tutorial is concerned, I've passed on everything that I wanted to, and hopefully from here on you can just take that and develop your own hairstyles and maybe even expand upon it and explore some more of the features that NHair has to offer. For now though, and in this lesson, we're going to turn our attention to her little bunny friend here, and we're going to give him some fur. Now this is only going to be a brief overview because it's tied in with this scene. Digital tutors do offer some more in-depth fur tutorials if you'd like to look at their extensive library, but this will just be a brief look at how to quickly throw some fur onto an object like our rabbit here. Now, and as you can see, I've applied just a basic Lambert just to give him a base colour for us to work from. So let's just minimise that. Let's go to our perspective view. So we could use NHair and apply that to the rabbit, but it's not hair that we're after. We're actually after fur, and applying hair, it won't cover the surface as nicely as fur would. Now at the moment we are working on a smooth meshed model here. So if I press 3, smooth mesh, 1 is normal. Now one thing to keep in mind is that the fur that we're going to apply will not render on a smoothed model, as in mesh smooth. The fur will render quite angular because it's following these lines here rather than this surface. So you will have to physically go in and apply a smooth command to your model. But let's get some fur on him first, and then we can look at that later on. So how do we assign fur? Well, if we look at our shelf here, we have our fur button, and we have lots of presets here. Now it may be cheating, but what's the point in recreating something that's already there? What I like to do is start off with a preset that matches kind of what I'm after, and then I adjust that to fit. But before we do, we need to activate the plugin. So let's go to our plugin manager, go down to fur, and see it's already loaded into this scene, but you just need to make sure that's loaded. So with our rabbit selected, let's just click squirrel here, and you see that's applied fur to him. Now straight away it's far too long, so let's open up our attribute editor. If we go into this squirrel here, which is the fur description which we've just applied, let's select that tab. Now we have lots of attributes to play with down here, but the only one we're interested in initially is the global scale. And what this is going to do is globally scale down all these for us. So the hair is obviously too long. Fur, sorry, is obviously too long. So let's drop that to 0.1. That's still too long. Maybe 0.1. That's a little bit better. So now we're starting to get the fur length that we're after, and it's probably a bit too long still. 0.5. That's probably about right. Now don't worry about it being off the surface here. As I said before, that's because it's working off our low resolution proxy model. Now it may look a bit sparse, the fur at the moment, so if you want to increase what you're seeing in the viewport, just go to your outliner. Let's just scroll down, fur feedback, and click on our squirrel feedback here. And here you have UV samples. So if I up that to 256 by 256, you see we've increased the amount of fur that we can see on our model here. Now you're probably wondering why I haven't smoothed this model already, and that is because obviously, just going back to what we were before, sorry, the more samples you have, the slower it's going to be in your viewport. Now, just like hair, the fur will cover the object depending on the UVs. And if we look at the rabbit here, we can see we have all his UVs laid out. But what we can also see, these patches are out of this 0-1 scale. And that is because these areas we don't want to have fur on them. So if you don't want fur on those, just move them out of the 0-1 grid here. And what's also going to happen later is we may end up with seams. Like this is his head, we have a seam here. That will be down the side of his head here. And when you come to render, you may end up with a seam. So you may need to adjust the UVs again later on. But for now, what we can do is let's disable smooth mesh. Let's apply a smooth operation. Let's maybe add 2. Smooth UVs, we want to smooth them all. Click smooth. And now you see the fur is now following the surface of the model. So we've applied our squirrel to our model. Now before we go ahead and start rendering, let's just go in and select this. Let's just go in and start adjusting our colours. Now our rabbit is purple, so we need to adjust these. So let's set our base colour to be the same, and maybe the tip colour to be the same as well. So now we're getting that same colour. If we scroll down, we have a specular colour as well. Let's set that the same but a little bit lighter. And obviously you have lots of other options you can play with down here. We have boldness. If we reduce that, you can see it's adding boldness to the surface by randomly removing elements of fur. You have inclination, and this is where increasing those samples helps, because you can see how the fur is going to be on the surface. So inclination, we may just remove that, reduce that down to 0 so the hair is standing out from the model. You have roll, which again is going to rotate it around the opposite way and flatten it to the surface, but we want it to stand out. Base opacity and tip opacity. Well, we want the tips to be a bit more transparent, so let's drop that down to maybe 0.2. And then obviously you've got your base width and tip, so when it renders, the base is going to be thicker than the tip, which is what you want. You have base curl, like so, and tip curl, scraggle, clumping, all sorts of things for you to play with. And like I say, this is just a very brief introduction to fur. If you want to know more about any of these options, please hunt out some of the Digital Tutors more in-depth tutorials. So enough talking. Let's go back to our scene. Let's save this. And I'm going to set a render going just of him, and I'll pause it while it does it. And let's see what this fur looks like initially. So that's rendered. If we compare it with how it was before, there doesn't really seem to be much going on. If we zoom in, we can see this fur there, but there's not very much of it compared to what we can see in the viewport. And that's because we increased the samples, but only in the viewport. We didn't increase the samples across the surface of the rabbit. So if we go back into our options here, we have density. Now 30,000, sorry. That is what we're seeing there. So what we maybe need to do is, let's add another naught onto the end. And rather than rendering it all, let's just render maybe just this section here, just to see how that compares. And again, I'll just pause the video while that does. So as you can see, by increasing that value, we've increased the density of the fur, so there's a lot more there. But we could probably add in more if we wanted to make the fur thicker. So let me do another render of the whole rabbit, and we can just see where we are. But what I'm going to do is just add another naught on, just to make it just to increase the density a little bit more. So select that area there. Let's leave that to run, and I'll pause the video. So as you can see, increasing the density has also increased the render time to now just over 12 minutes. So the more fur you have in there, the longer it's going to take to render. So maybe don't increase your density until you're at a stage where you're happy to move on a step further and wait for it to render. But if I zoom in, you can see the fur's looking quite nice actually. The problem is we have these darker banding areas here, and it's quite speckly on the top of his ears here. Now remember, we did use a preset squirrel to apply to this, and with that we're getting all those settings. Now we're going to ignore these initial ones here and instead go down to details, and if we go to base color, we can see there's a noise value on there. So let's reduce that. Tip color, let's reduce the noise off that as well. And as you can see in here, it's updated the viewport, so now we're just getting those main colors. Let's just check that there's nothing lingering on the ambient color maps or the specular. So let's reduce the specular color. That's it. So that should be enough. So now if we render again, I'll just save that and wait another 12 minutes. We should see that banding has gone. See you in 12 minutes. So now that's done, you can see the blotchiness has gone. Just by removing that noise value, excuse me, has got rid of that banding and that blotchiness, and just left us with this nice covering of fur. If we go down here, obviously we should render it at a higher resolution, but that's going to take even longer. But you can just see how in a few simple steps we've applied fur to our toy, and we're starting to get it pretty much how we want it to look. Here we can just see these dark lines, and that's just where the UV seams are. So that's telling us, certainly on these areas that we can see, we need to revisit our UV page and just stitch those areas together, unless you maybe want these seams in, because that's a natural part of where the toy is sewn together. It's completely up to you. You may also be looking at this and think, well, I want the fur longer, but then you can just go in here and adjust the length there. We've got all the other options that you can now play around with, the colour, the ambient colour if you want to add a bit of an ambient tone there. But as I said initially, this is just a very quick introduction to Maya fur. If you want to know more about it, please search for the other videos on the Digital Tutors library. And I think that is pretty much it for this course. What we've done is we have introduced you to NHAIR, how to set it up, how to adjust it, how to use dynamics and collisions, right down to editing, adding curves and rendering. And then right at the end, we've just done a brief overview of how to very quickly apply and adjust fur to our soft toy. Now from here on, I'm going to continue to work on this scene. I'm going to edit the toy a bit more, fix those seams, and I'm going to adjust the hair. So from this, what you're looking at now, the final render which accompanies this course will probably look quite different, and obviously she'll have proper skin tones and all that sort of thing as well. But I'm hoping now at the end of this course that you can take everything that you've learned, and on your next project using Maya's NHAIR won't seem as intimidating, and you're a lot more confident in using it and setting it up. So that's the end of this course. I hope you've enjoyed it, and I hope you've learned a lot from it. Feel free to contact me if you have any questions concerning this or any of my previous courses. And good luck, and I will see you in the next course.